Good morning, everyone. I'm Brianna, and welcome to Learning here on the ranch. I can't wait to have you join us for morning chores. We're going to go milk the goats and take care of them and talk all about what it's like to have goats on the farmstead. So come on. It's not super special. It's pretty simple and easy. The girls, you can see, she's saying hi right there. There's Daisy. So the reason our goats are actually in here right now is because we joke and laugh that this is the dungeon. But what happened was the girls keep escaping. They keep getting out. The new ranch that we moved to, it's not set up for goats. So the fencing here will not contain them. We've tried some alternatives and tried to kind of figure things out, but to be honest with you, they need a little bit more security, which this stall, which is made for horses, provides. So we've moved them in here temporarily. Their milking stanchion and everything is in here. They're safe. That's been the biggest piece of this puzzle, is just keeping them safe, because a loose goat is not safe. We have a lot of rhododendrons here, and goats will eat them, and they're extremely toxic. So instead of the girls getting sick, we ended up just putting them in this stall temporarily. So this is where they're at this morning. The milking stanchion setup is actually a super simple one. It's completely made of wood. I keep it clean with a broom, and I usually will hose it off and scrub it down probably once a year. I've got all of my equipment here and in these cupboards. Keeping it in the cupboards means that it also keeps the dust down, which helps with sanitation. So we'll get Sweet Daisy up on the stand and you'll get to see us milk. Good morning, girls. Good morning. Hi, ladies. So you can see in here, there's their stall, that's their grain bin, that's where their feeder is, and then I fill this hay bag every single day so that they have extras too, and then their water. Hi. So this stanchion has a headlock in it, which means that it's just a little, it doesn't actually touch her neck, but it's enough of a narrow entryway that I can lock her in it and her head can't get out. So this is really important to keep goats safe. If you don't do this, they'll end up moving all over the place and it's almost impossible to milk them. So Sweet Daisy here is incentivized. There's grain in this feeder here. And she loves coming up on the stand, so it's not difficult. I oftentimes will train my does to get up on the stand and eat long before they have any kids. That way I don't ever have to worry about them not liking it or having problems getting up on the stand. This is also where I do all my goat maintenance, so things like trimming her feet, caring for her, grooming her, getting her clipped. Clip means with a razor, for an electric razor, just like your hair. I'll oftentimes clip their belly in the winter time, or their udder in the winter time, because they don't like pulling on the hair when you milk. So there's two ways that you can milk a goat. You can milk them by machine, or you can milk them by hand. Because I only have one doe in milk right now, it's definitely more time efficient for me to hand milk, because with machine milking, you're going to have to do all of the dishes involved with the machine, including the hoses and those lines and getting them all clean, and that takes me way longer than washing one bucket. So I'm going to show you guys what it looks like to milk and the equipment that I use. Alright, so there's lots of different schools of thoughts involved in this. I actually will use baby wipes. I'll dry her udder with a very clean towel, and then I'll teat dip with iodine, and then I'll wipe it off again with this, and then I'll strip a couple strips of milk out into a separate bucket, and then I'll milk into my stainless bucket. I always milk into stainless. This is welded stainless, so it's going to have less potential contamination and problems. You can tell this bucket is very well used. See how it's all dented. That happens when cows step in it every once in a while. I taught a couple heifers to milk, and because of that, occasionally they'll step in the bucket. But I don't mind, because these buckets last forever. They're definitely worth the money, because you will spend more on them. But they definitely hold up, and they're easier to sanitize, and that's super important to keeping your milk healthy and clean. The other alternative that I'll do is oftentimes I will use sanitizing wipes, and it kind of eliminates the need for the iodine teat dip, even though I will still dip after I'm done milking, which I'll show you here soon. For me, it's really important to make sure that the health of my animal is taken care of from the start of milk until the end. The cleaning process really, really matters to keeping our milk clean, but the clean up process of her udder especially is just as important. If I don't dip her teats afterwards, it leaves that teat canal open to bacteria, and I don't want that to happen. I want to keep her healthy and safe, and keep her in milk without any problems with mastitis. So let's get milking. All right, so the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to brush her. I'm going to get any debris off. She also actually really enjoys it. She loves all of the scratches. She's such a good girl, and I want to make sure that she's also really well cared for. In the stand, it's really important that they're relaxed. If they're not, they won't have as good of a milk letdown. You're going to hear the goose a little bit because the goose lives in here too. So I'm going to go ahead and brush all the debris off all over. I'm going to just kind of look her over, make sure that she's healthy. I'm going to feel her udder, which is very full this morning. I typically won't touch her teats. Sorry, baby. I won't touch her teats until I'm ready to start cleaning them because I don't want the bacteria from my hands from having touched her to get into those teats. So let's get her cleaned up. But if in an ideal world, I'd have a sink out here, and after I cleaned her off, I'd get to wash my hands. That just keeps any bacteria, any dirt, anything like that getting into our milk. But thankfully, a really good baby wipe seems to do the job pretty well because she's not very dirty. So that's really helpful. But all right, I'm going to show you what a full udder looks like so you can see that as well. And I'm going to shift gears so you can see me milking from the back. All right, so you can see here Daisy has quite the full udder this morning. I did milk her, so right now she's milking probably about 9 in the morning and typically between 7:30 and 8 at night. So it's a little bit more full in the morning, but not a ton. When I look for a family goat, one of the things that I'm going to always be looking for is teat size. I don't want a goat that has such small teats that I have to kind of sit here and, hi Dino, milk like this. Your hands will cramp, Dino out. What I want is a goat that I can actually grasp easier to get milked out. That's really important to me. I don't want to have to use a machine every time I milk. I'm not a fan of machines, especially when you only have one goat. They don't really make time sense. And my hands are strong and I've been milking for years, so for me it's just faster to hand milk. But we'll go ahead and get her cleaned up and ready. I'm going to go ahead and take this baby wipe and I'm going to clean off her teats, make sure they're nice and clean. She's going to hump up her back, which really helps access. That's just what they naturally do. It's their natural reaction to have them touched. And then what I'll do is take my dry washcloth that I have that's very clean, and I'll go ahead and clean it off and dry it off. You never want to milk a wet udder. I have my teat dip here. You squeeze it and it comes right up into this hole here. I'm going to dip both teats, get them clean, and then go ahead and wipe that off. That's going to go ahead and sterilize any bacteria that's around them. I will oftentimes milk into a strip cup, but my strip cup's actually in the cow barn. So today I'm just going to put a couple strips right on my washcloth. Looks great. Super healthy. You always want to strip the first few streams of milk into something other than your milk bucket. If you put it in your milk bucket, you're going to end up with, that's typically the most contaminated milk, and it'll end up in your milk bucket, and you don't want that to happen. So in that case, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and get it, I put it on my washcloth, but normally I'd put it in a cup where I'd check it and make sure it doesn't have any chunks in it, but she's been really healthy. Her udder feels very firm this morning, so I'm typically right now getting about a gallon plus maybe a pint out of her. Typically, when you are talking about goat production or milk production of any kind, you talk about it in pounds. There is typically 8 pounds to 1 gallon. So right now she's producing about 9-ish pounds of milk a day. which means that we're making a lot of cheese, and she's been feeding baby Wilma, who is one of our piglets that was a runt in our last litter. So, all right, so I'm a really big fan of milking from this side of my animal. So I'm going to show you how we milk first, and then we'll go ahead and get the bucket underneath her. But you can see her teats right here. So when you hold their teat in your hand, you want this part to be up against their udder, and you're going to close off the milk into the teat cistern, which would be right here, and then use these fingers to squeeze the milk out. So I'm going to also show you guys a little bit of a slow motion video so you can kind of see it in action, because I don't milk that slowly. But that action is what helps the milk come out faster and easier. And then you have to actually release it for the milk to fill back up into the teat cistern. So this is the teat here, this whole piece, but there's actually a teat canal in the teat itself. It's called a cistern, but that canal is what you want to keep. You have to let the milk come back in. So you can see her, she's humping up, she's getting ready, and in this hand I'm just going to squeeze milk out. Now as she has less and less milk in her udder, I'll actually be able to get my whole hand pretty much around that teat. But in the very beginning, when I'm first milking, it's a little bit more difficult just because she's very full. So you can see my hand is right up against that udder. These two fingers close the milk off. Oh, my sprayer closes the milk off, and then these fingers are what squeezes the milk out. You can see it start to shrink up a little bit. That udder's getting a little bit smaller. It makes it easier on my hands to get in there. I want to be really cautious in the beginning. You can see my pinky isn't actually milking. I don't want milk on my hands to drip into the bucket, because that could contaminate it with bacteria, dirt, all that kind of stuff. And even though I filter my milk, it's still really important to make sure I keep it as clean as possible. I'm going to see if I can't show you from this side what this looks like coming into the bucket. My hand is going to be right up against that udder. My fingers are going to close off the teat so that milk can't go back up the udder, and then I'm going to go ahead and squeeze it out. From this angle, I'm going to my hands right up to it. I'm going to close the teat cistern, and into the bucket it goes. And you can see now I'm able to grip up higher on her udder, so my whole hand is able to grab. So you can see her udder now is pretty loose. There's not much milk there. I'm going to tilt this way, sorry guys. There's not much milk there. It's pretty loose. It's pretty soft. But what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and dip her teats really quickly. It's really, really important that I get her teats dipped after she's milked. She's not a fan of it, but it's important anyway because I have to keep the bacteria out of that udder and keep her safe. So I'll oftentimes dip. Goats don't like to be wet, so this whole process she's not a huge fan of it. And by now she's pretty done with her milk. Hey, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay. Daisy girl. Sometimes a belly scratch works, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm just gonna go like this, get a good belly scratch going, see if I can't just be really quick about it. And there we go. picking that she did is something that's actually really common in young, fresh does. So does that have never been milked before, maybe their first time first time they've ever had kids. It's really important that you take time and be patient. Because if you're not patient, they have some anxiety about being on the stand, and it'll just get worse and worse and worse over time. So you can see I figured out one of her tricks is just scratching her belly, and she stops and slows down and kind of thinks through what she's doing. And that seems to work really well. So another reason to keep your udders, oh, sorry sis, you're all right. Your udders clipped, just give them haircuts right up against the skin haircuts. You're okay. Hey. I'll give her a second. Is because then you don't end up with any hair in your milk. That happens, it's gonna happen even with short hairs, but it just means that you're not gonna have the long hairs that are getting into your milk. We did get some hairs in this milk. We're gonna go ahead and go into the house. We're gonna put her away, we're gonna filter it and get it taken care of and get the goats fed. Before I'm done with the girls for now, I'm going to make sure that they have access to all the feed that they need. Goats are ruminants, which means that they have to have food in their bellies or they could get sick. So they have a lot of bacteria in their gut that helps digest their food. And without that bacteria being fed, they get really gassy, they get really uncomfortable. It's just not good for them. So the other thing is we want to keep their milk production up. So Olive is going to be bred here soon. She is not with Kid, which we were hoping that she was bred, but she's not. So she's going in with a buck this week. And Daisy, on the other hand, is in milk. So we want to make sure that they're both having their nutrition needs met. They need a higher protein diet. So we feed them alfalfa and grass hay, and I'll show you what that looks like. Daisy says hi up here. So alfalfa is actually a legume. And these legumes are much higher in protein, so I make sure that she gets at least a flake of alfalfa every single day. Typically the flakes weigh between 5 and 7 pounds, which is good for her. They're actually pretty heavy compressed flakes. So she has a feeder just on the other side of this wall. So I literally just set it in there. All right, so you guys can see this is the inside of the stall. The feeder is actually there in the corner. Not super efficient, it's made for horses, but it works for that. We just tossed it right over that railing over there. Super efficient and quick and easy feeding. However, they waste a lot, so that's another thing to consider. So Daisy, you can see she's the black goat. She's the one we just milked. She's a La Mancha goat. La Manchas have little tiny crinkle ears right up next to their heads. They are really great producers of a really mild flavored milk is what we've found. She has the best flavor. She's gonna come say hi. She has the best flavored milk of the both goats that we have. Olive, on the other hand, Olive is a Toggenburg. Olive produces more milk. It has a little bit more of a goaty flavor to it. So for me personally, I really love it in Chev cheese. But Olive, is not bred right now. So she's gonna actually be crossed with our Nubian buck that we have. And so hopefully we'll get some kids here in this spring, sometime in February. Goat's gestation is 5 months. So from the time that she's bred, we'll have about 5 months before she'll kid. So we're looking at February kids, which is great. One of the best things about having our family goats is that they actually help us in lambing season, because if there's any bummer lambs, anything that's happening, I can actually put the girls on the stand and put the bummer lambs on them, and they nurse them great. So it's another alternative and option to having family goats, and another reason that they're so efficient on our homestead and for our actual ranch production. So they're pretty darn wonderful. The neat thing too is that goat milk is much closer to sheep milk than cow's milk. So even though we can supplement them with our dairy cow's milk, it's actually better for them that they get either goat's or sheep milk. So this feeder here is actually called a hay net. This is what I will put their grass hay in, and the reason being is because if I put it in that corner feeder, they pull it out and they scatter it all over the stall floor. I will put a disclaimer out here and say though, not all hay feeders are made the same. This hay feeder is what's called a slow feeder. The holes to that slow feeder are no more than 1 inch in diameter, or in width I should say, and that keeps them safer. Goats are notorious for getting tangled up in things, so be really careful if you ever have a hay net. You want to make sure it's the right one. It's actually called a slow feeder. It's made for horses. And because it has that tiny little size to it, it doesn't allow them to pull huge chunks out and scatter it all over. And it also does not allow them to get their heads or their feet stuck in it, which is a huge issue with goats and hay feeders. So keep that in mind. I usually only fill that once a day. So they have, that whole feeder is actually full of alfalfa. And then they have this hay net that I fill in the evening, and then they have it all night long, and then they get alfalfa again in the morning. So I've done mixes before where I've had 50-50 going all the time, and I've just found that this works best for us. The other thing I actually will do is I will give them a dairy 16 grain. And that grain is 16% grain. We feed, actually I don't feed a pelleted one. This grain, you can kind of see it if I get up closer hopefully, is actually an open grain. It's whole. It's got cracked corn, it's got barley, it's got vitamins, minerals, all sorts of different stuff. Right there you can see it a little better. And I will actually put this in here. They each get, for every pound of milk that Daisy produces, I try to at least give her a half a pound of grain. She won't eat a full pound of it for every pound of milk that she produces. She just won't eat that. So for our sake and for our farm, I'll use this. I also feed them chaff hay. So I feed that to them in the evening. Chaff hay is fermented alfalfa. It comes bagged. It's a great product and it keeps her milk production really high. So if she were to have free access to chaff hay all day long, she would actually produce a lot more than she produces now. However, I don't need to push her to produce that much. And it can be pretty expensive. So I've just decided to do this method. It works great. Works for us really well. All right, so the girls are fed and watered. They're taken care of. They're in here for the day. Sadly, we have tried so many different ways to get them out on pasture, but right now our fencing just isn't good enough. They will either jump. In our case, our girls will actually jump the 42-inch electro netting. They need something taller and they need something very hot. So because of that, we're gonna go ahead and leave them in here today because that just keeps them safe. And let's go get our milk filtered. So here's today's milk. You can see there's actually a couple hairs in there. So we're gonna filter this milk. We always filter it anyway, but that's just another reason to keep their udders clipped. All right, so we're in here in our utility room. This is actually where I keep all of my milk supplies clean. I have milk supplies in here from this morning from the cow, but we'll go ahead and get the goat milk strained. So I have a strainer here that I'll actually put a mesh thing in, and I'll show it to you. So it's actually a filter, and that goes right here in the strainer. It's disposable, so that I can actually just take it out and toss it. You can use something like cheesecloth, things like that. I have actually had my milk taste a little funky because my cheesecloth didn't get clean enough. So I've just gone to this method. It's easier when you're milking as many animals as we are. I've just found that sometimes something has to give on ease of use. So I have a gallon jar here. And I'm actually just gonna go ahead and set my filter right on top of it. And I have my pail of milk from the goat here. All right, so you can see she gave us about a half gallon this morning, which is great. She is about, I think she's 4 weeks fresh. I'll have to go look at my paperwork, but I think she's 4 weeks fresh. Sadly, Daisy actually lost her kids. So both of her kids passed away. I do night checks when they are kidding, and somehow I had missed, there was a 2-hour window between my night checks, and she kidded in that 2-hour window, and she never cleaned their faces off. So the sack that they came out in was on their face when I got out there, and they were both gone at that point. So she's producing a lot of milk for us, and we're very thankful for that, but we're also really sad that her kids aren't around. We were really excited about them. All right. Joining me today, I'm so excited that I got to share what it's like to have family goats here on the ranch. Next month, I'm actually going to be taking you to a goat dairy just down the road where we're going to go ahead and tour what it looks like to have large-scale goat the milking parlor here soon, into the actual dairy barn. So as that happens, I'll make sure I take you along for that too, and I'm so glad you were here. So see you later.